The security guard didn't even look at me when he cut my badge, just held it flat against the counter, slid the scissors through the lanyard like he was trimming a coupon, and dropped both halves into a plastic bin. 12 minutes. That's how long it took to erase 7 years. I sat in my car in the Novatech parking lot with a cardboard box on the passenger seat. My lab notebooks were still inside the building, 3 shelves of them, but they'd let me keep a coffee mug and a framed photo of my niece. The late May humidity pressed against the windshield, and I couldn't tell if the tightness in my chest was rage, or the weather, or just the sudden absence of purpose. For 7 years, my body had known exactly where to go at 7:15 every morning. Now it didn't. My phone buzzed, a push notification from TechCrunch. Meet the young mind behind Novatech's battery breakthrough, Garrett Whitfield on innovation, vision, and the future of solid-state energy. I tapped it. His face filled my screen. 26 years old, clean jaw, that rehearsed half-smile I'd watched him practice in every all-hands meeting since he showed up 8 months ago. The article quoted him saying the solid-state battery design came from a place of deep technical intuition and months of hands-on research. Months. I spent 3 years on the cathode architecture alone, 2 more on the electrolyte composition that made the whole thing possible. 14 months ago, I solved the dendrite propagation problem that every major battery lab in the country had been grinding on for a decade. I solved it at 2 in the morning on a Tuesday, eating cold pad thai at my bench in Lab C, using a modified ceramic separator I'd been testing since my 2nd year at Novatech. I remember the exact moment the impedance readings stabilized. I remember putting my fork down and staring at the screen and whispering the word "there" to nobody, because nobody else was in the building. Garrett Whitfield has an MBA from a mid-tier program and has never held a pipette. His uncle is Richard Whitfield, Novatech's CEO and co-founder. Garrett was hired 8 months ago as Director of Battery Innovation, a title that didn't exist before he arrived, and a role that, as far as I could tell, consisted mostly of sitting in meetings I'd prepared for and forwarding emails I'd written. I closed the article and stared at the building. Glass and concrete, 4 stories, the Novatech logo catching afternoon sun like it was posing for a brochure. I'd walked through those doors 6,000 times. I knew which hallway floor tile was cracked near Lab C. I knew the vending machine on the 2nd floor dispensed 2 bags of pretzels if you hit B7 twice fast. I knew the hum of the battery test chambers so well that I could tell from the hallway which cells were cycling and which were resting, the same way you learn the breathing of someone you've slept next to for years. None of that was mine anymore. I opened my personal laptop, the one they hadn't taken because it was never company property and nobody thought to ask about it. I navigated to a dashboard I'd built 3 years ago, back when Novatech's IT infrastructure was too small and too underfunded to run proper firmware management, and I'd volunteered to handle it myself because it needed doing and nobody else wanted to do it. The battery management system's thermal control firmware was still running on Novatech's production servers. Every battery pack in production, every unit shipping to clients, every prototype sitting in that building ran on code that started as my graduate thesis at NC State. Code I'd adapted, refined, and licensed to Novatech under a personal agreement buried in Appendix D of my original employment contract. A renewable agreement, renewable annually, tied to my active employment, my employment that ended 12 minutes ago. The dashboard showed 47 active nodes, all green, all running firmware that no longer had a valid license holder employed inside that company. I didn't press anything, not yet. My hands were still shaking from the HR meeting, and my jaw hurt from clenching it through their rehearsed script about organizational restructuring and evolving team needs. I could still smell the conference room, that particular mix of stale, recycled air, and the lavender diffuser someone in HR thought made terminations feel more human. But I sat there in that humid parking lot with the box of my things beside me, like a passenger who didn't want to talk, and I thought about a phrase my mother used to say when I was a kid growing up in Durham, and some neighbor took credit for her garden design. "You can pick the flowers, baby, but you can't move the roots." I closed the laptop, started the engine, pulled out of the lot, and drove home to the apartment that was about to get a lot harder to afford. The firmware was still running, and the roots were still mine. I came to Novatech when I was 24, the same year they almost went under. The company had 32 employees and a sodium-ion battery project that was hemorrhaging money. Nobody in the research triangle wanted to touch it. The chemistry was unstable, the manufacturing costs were absurd, and the lead scientist had just left for a competitor. I applied because I was broke and stubborn and had just finished my master's thesis on solid-state electrolyte interfaces, and because Novatech was the only lab in the triangle willing to let a 24-year-old with no industry experience run her own experiments. My first year, I worked 60-hour weeks in a clean room the size of a walk-in closet. The equipment was second-hand. The mass spectrometer drifted so badly I had to recalibrate it every morning before I could trust a single reading. I wrote my own firmware for the battery test chambers because the commercial software was too expensive and too slow, and I stayed late on Fridays to run impedance sweeps that would finish cycling at 2 in the morning. By year 2, I'd redesigned the electrolyte composition from scratch, moved away from sodium-ion entirely, proposed a solid-state lithium architecture that used a ceramic separator nobody else in the field was taking seriously yet. My manager at the time, a quiet electrochemist named Frank, told me I was either going to save this company or bankrupt it. He signed off on the pivot anyway. Frank retired 3 years later. I went to his going-away dinner. I was one of 4 people who showed up. The breakthrough came in my 6th year. I'd been running thermal cycling tests on a modified separator composition, adjusting the sintering temperature by 2-degree increments, each batch taking 11 days to process. Batch 47 held, then batch 48, then 49. Stable charge density at 420 watt-hours per kilogram. No dendrite growth, no thermal runaway. The numbers were clean enough that I ran the sequence 3 more times just to make sure I wasn't reading them wrong. I walked into the break room that Wednesday morning and made a pot of the burnt coffee nobody else bothered to fix and stood there by the window, watching the dogwood trees and understanding that the thing I had spent 6 years chasing was real. Novatech filed the provisional patent 4 months later. My name was on it. My research was in every line. The company started growing. New hires, new lab space, new equipment that actually worked. I moved from the closet clean room to Lab C, which had windows and a ventilation system that didn't sound like it was actively dying. Then Garrett arrived. He showed up on a Monday in a blazer that was slightly too fitted and shoes that were clearly brand new. Richard Whitfield introduced him at the all hands as the new director of battery innovation. He was 25. His background was venture capital and strategic consulting. I remember sitting in the back row, watching him give a short speech about cross-functional synergy and market acceleration, and feeling the specific kind of dread that comes from watching someone who doesn't understand your work get promoted above it. At first, it was small. Garrett started sitting in on my weekly briefings. Then he started consolidating my reports into his own decks for the leadership team. The first time I saw my thermal cycling data presented to the board in a slide deck with Garrett's name in the footer, I told my direct manager, Linda. She listened, nodded, and said, "Garrett's streamlining communications. You should focus on the science, Arya. That's where you're strongest." I focused on the science. Over the next 6 months, my name disappeared from internal communications 1 layer at a time. First from the slide footers, then from the project tracker, then from the meeting invites. I was still doing the work, still running the experiments, debugging the firmware, writing the technical specifications that kept the production line functional. But the reports that went upstairs had Garrett's name on them. The client-facing documents had Garrett's name on them. The patent continuation filing that went out in February had Garrett's name on it. I brought it up twice more. Once to Linda, who suggested I document my concerns through the proper channels, and once to HR, where a man named Paul told me that inventorship is determined by legal review, not individual perception. I should have fought harder then. I know that now, but I was doing the thing I'd spent my whole life training to do, and part of me believed that the work would speak for itself, that someone would notice, that the system would correct. The system did not correct. The system hired the CEO's nephew, gave him my title and my data, and then, when the patent was worth $2.7 billion in projected licensing revenue, the system fired me and offered me an NDA and 6 months of severance to go quietly. I went, but not quietly. The firing happened on a Thursday. I remember because Thursdays were when I ran my weekly impedance tits, and I was annoyed that I'd have to reschedule the batch cycle when Linda's calendar invite popped up at 8:45. Quick sync in conference room B. No agenda. No other attendees listed except Paul from HR. I knew before I walked in. Conference room B was on the first floor, the one with the frosted glass panels and the round table that was too small for the room. The air conditioning was set 10 degrees too cold, the way it always was in that part of the building, and someone had put a lavender plug-in diffuser in the corner that smelled like a department store candle trying to disguise itself as calm. Linda was already seated. She had a folder in front of her. Paul sat to her left with a laptop open, his face arranged in that particular expression HR people practice for these conversations. Concerned but controlled. Sympathetic but structural. Arya, thanks for coming in. We wanted to talk to you about some changes to the team structure. The word restructuring came up 4 times in the first 2 minutes. The word contribution came up twice. The word direction came up 3 times. Nobody used the word fired until I did. You're firing me. Paul looked at Linda. Linda looked at her folder. We're restructuring the battery innovation team to align with our growth stage operational needs. Your role, as currently defined, is being eliminated. My role, the one where I invented the product that made the company worth anything. Paul slid a document across the table. 12 pages, heavy stock, Novatech letterhead. Separation agreement. I picked it up and started reading it the way I read everything, carefully from the top, 1 clause at a time. Paul shifted in his chair. People don't like it when you actually read the things they slide across the table. Page 3. Enhanced severance, 6 months of base salary. Continued health benefits for 90 days. A reference letter from Linda that would describe my work as technically excellent. Page 5. Comprehensive non-disclosure agreement. I couldn't discuss Novatech's products, processes, trade secrets, client relationships, or internal communications with any third party, including media, competitors, legal representatives not retained by Novatech, or any person or entity that could reasonably be expected to use such information adversely. Page 7. IP assignment clause. And this was the line that made my hands go cold. Employee acknowledges and confirms that all inventions, discoveries, improvements, and works of authorship conceived or reduced to practice during the period of employment, including but not limited to those developed prior to the effective date of this agreement, are the sole property of Novatech Inc. The effective date was backdated to my start date, 7 years ago, before Garrett, before the breakthrough, before the patent existed. I looked at Paul. This IP clause covers work I did before Garrett Whitfield was even hired. Paul's expression didn't change. It's standard language, Arya. It reflects the scope of your employment agreement. My employment agreement has a different IP clause. I've read it. This separation agreement supersedes prior terms upon execution. I put the document down. I didn't sign it. Linda spoke for the first time since her opening script. Arya, we value what you've built here. This package is generous. We hope you'll consider it carefully. I looked at her and saw something I hadn't expected. Not cruelty, not even indifference. Fear. Linda was afraid of something or someone, and this meeting was her way of staying out of its path. I stood up, took the document with me. Paul started to say something about returning it, but I was already at the door. Security met me at my office. A guard named Dennis, who I'd said good morning to 1,000 times, walked beside me while I packed a box. He didn't make eye contact. I took my coffee mug, my niece's photo, and a stress ball shaped like a battery that the marketing team had made for a trade show 3 years ago. They kept my notebooks, they kept my laptop, they kept my access to 7 years of files. Dennis walked me to the parking lot. At the door, he mumbled something like, "Sorry about this, Arya." I nodded, walked to my car, sat there. That's when I pulled out my phone and saw the TechCrunch article, and that's when something shifted in my chest from grief to precision. I got home at 4:30 and opened my personal email. 3 months earlier, a colleague named Dex had forwarded me the slide deck Garrett used at the February board meeting, the one where he presented the solid-state battery roadmap to Novatech's investors. I'd asked for it because something felt wrong, and I wanted to see it for myself. I opened it now and checked the metadata. Creator, Arya Patel. Modified by Garrett Whitfield. Created October of the previous year. Modified January. He hadn't even made his own slides. He'd taken mine, stripped my name, and presented them as his vision. I saved the file. Then I opened a new folder on my desktop and named it Timeline. I spent the next 3 days building a case on my kitchen table. My apartment in Durham was small, a one-bedroom near 9th Street with warped hardwood floors and a kitchen window that overlooked somebody else's fire escape. But the table was big enough to spread out on, and that's what I did. Sticky notes, printouts, highlighted pages, timestamps arranged in chronological order from left to right like a crime scene reconstruction, which, in a way, it was. I started with what I had. My personal email archive held 7 years of correspondence. I'd always been careful about sending myself copies of important communications because Novatech's email server had crashed twice in my first year. And I'd learned not to trust it. I had my original patent draft submissions, sent through Novatech's internal IP portal with confirmation receipts. I had time-stamped lab notes I'd emailed to myself at the end of every work week, a habit Frank had taught me during my first year. Always keep a shadow copy, he'd told me. Companies lose things when it's convenient. Frank had been smarter than I'd given him credit for. I pulled up the patent Novatech filed in January under Garrett's name. United States Patent Application, serial number visible in the public database. I compared it to my original provisional filing from 18 months earlier. The claims were structurally identical. The same cathode composition ranges, the same electrolyte formulation, the same thermal management parameters. Garrett's filing even used my notation style, the way I formatted molecular ratios and temperature tolerances, because he'd copied directly from my lab reports without understanding them well enough to change the conventions. But the assignment paperwork was different. Garrett was listed as sole inventor. The effective filing date was 3 months before he was hired at Novatech. Someone had manufactured the timeline. I dug deeper. There was a second filing I hadn't known about, a continuation patent submitted in February, 2 weeks after my firing, that extended the claims to cover next-generation electrolyte compositions. Those compositions were based on my work too, but from a different source. I couldn't figure out where they'd gotten the data until I cross-referenced the thermal runaway prevention parameters in the continuation filing with numbers I recognized. Those numbers came from my personal research, work I'd done on weekends, on my own laptop, using a small testing rig I'd built with my own money in a rented lab space near the university. Research I hadn't submitted to Novatech because it wasn't company work. It was mine. I'd been exploring solid-state architectures beyond what the company was pursuing, pushing into territory that I wanted to patent independently someday. I'd shared some of those results exactly once, in a brainstorming session 4 months ago in the break room over burnt coffee. I'd been talking to Dex about a thermal management problem he was working on, and I'd pulled up my personal data on my phone to show him an approach that might work. We'd talked for maybe 20 minutes. I'd thought it was an informal collegial exchange between two engineers who respected each other's work. Someone else had been listening, or Garrett had gotten to it some other way, because the continuation patent used my exact data, my thermal runaway prevention curves, my electrolyte ratios, numbers that existed only on my personal machine and in that one conversation. I sat at my kitchen table at 11 at night, the overhead light too harsh, the fire escape outside the window casting shadows across my sticky note timeline, and I felt something settle in my stomach like a stone dropping into still water. This wasn't one person's laziness. This wasn't Garrett being an entitled nephew who slapped his name on someone else's slides. This was extraction. Systematic, institutional extraction of my work, including work that was never theirs to take. The timeline on my table told the story. October. Garrett starts attending my briefings. November. My name disappears from internal reports. December. Garrett presents his roadmap using my slides. January. Patent filed under his name with backdated assignment. February. Continuation patent filed using my personal research. March. I'm fired and handed an NDA designed to seal the whole thing shut. 5 months. That's how long it took to dismantle 7 years of work and present it as someone else's innovation. I took a photo of the table. Then I organized everything into a folder structure on my laptop. Original filings with timestamps. Garrett's filings with highlighted identical passages. The backdated assignment document. The slide deck metadata. The continuation patent with the personal research data highlighted. Email confirmations from Novatech's patent coordinator acknowledging my original submissions. I saved 3 copies. 1 on my laptop, 1 on an external drive, 1 encrypted in cloud storage. Then I texted Dex. I need to talk to you, in person, not on company channels. He responded 20 minutes later. I know. I've been wondering when you'd reach out. Thursday? The diner off Highway 54? I confirmed. Then I closed my laptop, washed the single coffee mug in my sink, and went to bed knowing I wouldn't sleep. The diner off Highway 54 was the kind of place that hadn't changed its menu since the 90s. Vinyl booths, laminate tables, a bell on the door that rang when you walked in. I got there early and ordered coffee that came in a heavy ceramic mug with a hairline crack along the rim. The parking lot outside was half empty, which was the point. Nobody from Novatech came here. It was a barbecue and biscuits place in a strip mall between a laundromat and a nail salon, and it was exactly where 2 engineers could sit without being recognized. Dex showed up 12 minutes late, which wasn't like him. He was a firmware engineer, which meant he was usually precise about time the way he was precise about code. He slid into the booth across from me and didn't say hello. Just sat there for a moment, his hands flat on the table, like he was deciding whether to stay. I shouldn't be here, he said. I know. I've got a mortgage. Grace and I just refinanced. The twins start pre-K next fall. I know, Dex. He looked at me for a long time. We'd worked together for 4 years. He maintained the firmware that ran on the production line battery management systems, and I designed the underlying thermal control architecture that his code communicated with. We weren't close friends, but we were the kind of colleagues who trusted each other's work completely, which in engineering is sometimes a deeper thing than friendship. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded printout, slid it across the table, face down. The continuation patent they filed last month. I printed it from the patent portal before they locked down access. I unfolded it. I'd already seen the public filing, but this was the internal submission form, which included the inventor disclosure and the supporting research references. My eyes went to the technical data section. The thermal runaway prevention methodology listed in the continuation patent was identical to the data I'd shown Dex in the break room. Not similar. Identical. The same electrolyte stability ratios, the same temperature thresholds, the same degradation curves. Data that existed on my personal laptop and nowhere else in Novatech's system. How did they get this? I kept my voice level, but my fingers had tightened on the printout hard enough to crease it. Dex exhaled. Garrett asked me, about 2 weeks after your break room conversation, whether I'd gotten any interesting inputs from the team on thermal management approaches. I told him you'd shown me something promising. He asked me to write up what I remembered. I thought it was for a technical review. He paused. He recorded what I wrote. I saw it later in his patent disclosure notes, attributed to a collaborative internal session. No names, no dates, just the data presented as if it came from inside the company's R&D pipeline. I sat with that. The coffee had gone cold. Outside, someone pulled into the laundromat parking lot, and the headlights swept across our table. Dex. The research he filed was mine. Done on my own time, on my own equipment, in a lab I rent with my own money. It was never Novatech property. He nodded slowly. I figured. The thermal parameters were too advanced for anything in our internal roadmap. I should have questioned it when Garrett asked. He stopped, rubbed his eyes. I just didn't think that far. I was dealing with my own production deadline, and I didn't think about where the data would go. I didn't blame him. That was the machinery of it. The system didn't need villains at every level. It just needed people who were too busy, too cautious, or too practical to look sideways at the thing passing through their hands. Will you go on record? He took a long time. The diner bell rang as another customer walked in. The waitress refilled my mug without asking. I can't go public. If Novatech connects me to you, I'm done. I've got 15 years vested in my retirement plan. Grace would never forgive me. I'm not asking you to testify. I'm asking if I can reference what you told me. Not your name, just the information. He thought about it, picked up his own coffee, set it down without drinking. Yeah, you can use the information. Just keep me out of it. Thank you. We sat there for another minute. The quiet was heavier than any conversation we'd ever had. Arya. He looked at the printout between us. You know this isn't just Garrett, right? A 26-year-old with an MBA doesn't file continuation patents on his own. Someone in legal prepared this. Someone on the executive team approved the inventor disclosure. This has Richard's fingerprints on it. I already knew that. But hearing Dex say it out loud made it realer. The way seeing a crack in a wall is different from feeling the floor shift underneath you. Richard Whitfield built Novatech from a garage. He'd hired me personally. He'd shaken my hand after the first successful prototype demonstration and told me I was the best investment this company ever made. Now he was helping his nephew steal the thing that made the company worth stealing from. I paid for Dex's coffee. He left first, checking the parking lot before he walked to his car. I sat there for 10 more minutes, rereading the continuation patent, memorizing the data points that proved the research came from my personal work. Then I drove home and added everything to the timeline folder. The fight wasn't with Garrett anymore. It was with the whole building. The cease and desist arrived on a Tuesday, hand-delivered by a courier in a polo shirt, who asked me to sign for it like he was dropping off a birthday present. It was a 7-page letter on heavyweight stationery from Morrison, Keller & Associates, Novatech's outside counsel. The language was specific, precise, and designed to make my pulse quicken, which it did. Novatech Inc. has reason to believe that you are in unauthorized possession of proprietary trade secrets, confidential technical data, and commercially sensitive materials belonging to the company. Failure to return all such materials and confirm their permanent deletion from any personal devices, cloud storage, or third-party systems within 14 days will result in the initiation of civil and criminal proceedings under the Defend Trade Secrets Act and applicable North Carolina statutory provisions. The letter referenced the firmware dashboard by name. They knew I had access. It also referenced unauthorized retention of company intellectual property, which was their way of saying they wanted my personal research files, the ones from my rented lab, the ones that were never company property. I read the letter 3 times at my kitchen table, standing up, because I couldn't sit still. Then I called Sonia. Sonia Reeves was a patent litigator who worked out of a narrow office on Chapel Hill Boulevard. She wore reading glasses on a chain and had a bookshelf behind her desk that was organized by Federal Circuit, which told me she was either extremely thorough or extremely particular, and in my experience, those were the same thing. I'd found her through a referral from Frank, my old manager, who'd worked with her on an IP dispute at a previous company. She'd agreed to take my case on partial contingency after I showed her the backdated assignment documents. I sat in her office with the cease and desist on the desk between us and the afternoon light cutting through her window blinds in horizontal lines. The patent fraud case is strong, Sonia said. She took her glasses off and cleaned them, which I'd noticed she did when she was thinking carefully. The backdated assignment, the metadata, the continuation patent filing using your personal research. We can build an inventorship challenge that would survive a motion to dismiss. But the firmware is a problem. She put her glasses back on. You have a valid license argument. The code is adapted from your thesis, licensed under Appendix D, renewable annually, tied to your employment. Your employment ended, the license expired. Legally, you may be correct. Maybe? The question is what a judge looks at when you deactivate a production system. You'll say license revocation. They'll say sabotage, computer fraud, tortious interference with business relationships. She tapped the cease and desist. Their attorneys are already framing the narrative. If you touch that firmware while this letter is active, they'll use it to bury the patent claim under a mountain of criminal exposure. I stared at the lines of light on her desk. The building across the street had a Novatech logo on a banner. I hadn't noticed it before. So what do you recommend? The safe path is an inventorship challenge through the patent office. We file a petition, present the evidence, let the process work. It could take 18 months, maybe 2 years. And the firmware? Leave it running, don't touch it. Let the license question be a negotiating chip down the line, not an opening move that gets you arrested. I sat with that, the safe path. 18 months of waiting while Garrett did press interviews about his vision, and the company built a licensing empire on my work. 2 years of watching from my one-bedroom apartment while the battery I designed powered products with someone else's name on the label. Sonia watched me. She was good at reading clients. I could see her calculating. "You're thinking about the settlement," she said. I was. The severance Novatech offered was 6 months of salary, $48,000. My rent was $1,700 a month. The rented lab space was $800. My savings would cover maybe 4 months after the severance ran out. The practical math was simple and devastating. If I signed the NDA and took the severance, I could pay my bills for 10 months and start looking for a new position. I could walk away from the patent, the firmware, the evidence, the whole ugly fight, and just start over. Some part of me wanted to. The tired part. The part that had been working 60-hour weeks for 7 years and had nothing to show for it except a coffee mug and a cardboard box. I almost said yes. I sat in Sonia's office and looked at the cease and desist and the light through the blinds and the Novatech banner across the street, and I felt my resistance draining out of me like air from a slow leak. What was the point? The company had lawyers and money and an institutional machinery built to grind people like me into settlement paperwork. I was one person with a laptop and a folder of sticky notes on a kitchen table. Then I thought about Garrett's quote in that TechCrunch article. Innovation is about having the courage to see what others miss. The courage. He said courage while standing on a floor I built, holding a patent I wrote, wearing a title I earned. I picked up the cease and desist and folded it once, neatly. I'm not signing their NDA, and I'm not waiting 2 years. Sonia looked at me over her glasses. Then we need to talk about timing. Yes, I said, we do. I spent the next 3 days mapping everything. My apartment became a war room. Laptop on the kitchen table, legal pad beside it, 2 monitors I'd borrowed from my rented lab space propped up on stacks of textbooks. I ate standing up and slept in 3-hour intervals. Not because I was manic, but because the firmware architecture was complex. And I wanted to make sure I understood every dependency before I made a move that couldn't be unmade. Here's what most people don't understand about firmware in hardware products. The battery itself is chemistry, lithium, ceramic separator, cathode, anode. But the thing that makes a battery pack safe and functional is the battery management system, and the brain of that system is the firmware. It monitors cell voltage, manages thermal regulation, prevents overcharge, prevents thermal runaway, and communicates with the vehicle or device that's drawing power. Without it, the battery pack is an expensive brick. Dangerous, actually, because an unmanaged lithium cell can overheat and fail catastrophically. Every Novatech battery pack in production ran my thermal management firmware. Not the company's version, mine. The code started as my master's thesis at NC State, where I'd designed a thermal regulation algorithm for lithium polymer cells. When I joined Novatech, the company's firmware was garbage. Commercial off-the-shelf software that couldn't keep up with our cell chemistry. I rewrote the thermal management layer from scratch, using my thesis code as the foundation, and licensed it to Novatech under a personal software license agreement. The license was buried in Appendix D of my employment contract, a document that Novatech's legal team had clearly never read carefully. The terms were simple. I granted Novatech a non-exclusive license to use my thermal management firmware in their battery products for the duration of my employment, renewable annually upon my continued service. If my employment ended, the license expired 30 days after termination, and Novatech would need to negotiate a new standalone license or migrate to alternative firmware. My employment ended 26 days ago. The 30-day grace period expired in 4 days. The dashboard I'd built was originally a maintenance tool, a simple web interface that let me monitor firmware status across Novatech's production nodes. I could see which battery packs were running my firmware, which version they were on, and whether the thermal management parameters were operating within spec. The dashboard also included a license management function that I'd built for my own tracking purposes, a way to activate or deactivate the runtime license remotely. If I deactivated the license, the firmware would enter a safe shutdown mode. Not a crash, not a failure, a controlled, graceful deactivation that would put the battery management system into standby, disable active thermal regulation, and display a license-expired notification on any connected diagnostic interface to the batteries themselves wouldn't explode or catch fire. They'd just stop being managed, which meant they couldn't be used safely in any product application. Every Novatech battery pack would become inert. Every production line would halt. Every unit under testing would go dark. I wasn't going to damage anything. I was going to stop providing a service I was no longer being paid to provide. The question was timing. I called Sonia and walked her through the firmware architecture, the license agreement, and the deactivation process. She listened without interrupting, which I'd learned meant she was either impressed or concerned. "The license language is clear enough," she said. "If a court accepts that the firmware is your independent intellectual property licensed to Novatech, then deactivation after license expiration is defensible. Not guaranteed, but defensible." What's the risk? They'll argue the firmware was a work product created during employment. They'll say the license agreement is void because it conflicts with your employment IP assignment. They'll claim computer fraud under the CFAA. The IP assignment in my original contract specifically excludes software adapted from pre-employment academic work. That's Appendix C. A pause. "You have a copy?" 3 copies, backed up in 3 locations. Another pause. I could hear Sonia tapping a pen on her desk. "When does the grace period expire?" 4 days. "And what happens in 4 days?" "Nothing, unless I choose to act." Dex texted me that evening. I hadn't reached out because I'd promised to keep him out of it, but he reached out on his own. "Meridian Motors demo next Thursday. Biggest client presentation of the year. Garrett's leading it. The whole battery pack line is being showcased. Richard's flying in." Meridian Motors, the EV manufacturer that accounted for 40% of Novatech's projected revenue. A $400 million a year contract that depended entirely on the solid-state battery pack performing flawlessly in a live demonstration. A demonstration that would run on my firmware. I sat at my kitchen table and stared at the dashboard on my laptop screen. 47 green nodes, 4 days until the license expired. 7 days until the Meridian demo. The timing was either a gift or a trap. Either way, it was the only window I was going to get. I picked up my phone and texted Sonia 2 words. "Next Thursday." She texted back 1. "Understood." I closed the laptop and stood at my kitchen window, looking out at the fire escape and the Durham night. Somewhere across town, in a glass and concrete building I used to call home, 47 battery packs were humming on my code, and nobody in that building knew what the next 7 days would cost them. Thursday came clear and warm, the kind of May morning in the Triangle, where the humidity hasn't fully arrived yet, and the sky looks like it was rinsed overnight. I drove to the Novatech campus at 1:30 in the afternoon and parked across the street, in the lot of a medical supply company, with a clear sightline to the demonstration center. The Meridian Motors delegation had arrived an hour earlier. I could see their rental cars in the visitor lot. A black SUV with the Meridian logo on the door was parked near the front entrance. Through the glass lobby, I could see people moving in business casual and lanyards. Somewhere inside that building, Garrett Whitfield was about to present my battery technology to the client that would determine Novatech's future. At 1:45, I opened my laptop. The firmware dashboard loaded. 47 active nodes, all green. The demonstration center's battery test units were nodes 38 through 43. I could see them cycling in real time, their thermal management parameters running within spec, my algorithm keeping every cell balanced, cool, and stable. I opened a second window. The license revocation notice I'd drafted with Sonia, addressed to Novatech's general counsel. It cited Appendix D, referenced the 30-day grace period that had expired 2 days ago, and formally notified the company that the thermal management firmware license was terminated effective immediately. I'd signed it electronically. Sonia had countersigned. At 2:12, I sent the notice via certified email. At 2:14, I positioned my cursor over the deactivation command on the dashboard. My hand was steady, which surprised me. My breathing wasn't. I thought about Sonia's warning, criminal exposure, CFAA, tortious interference. I thought about the $48,000 of severance I was walking away from. I thought about the fact that some part of the battery industry would always remember me as the engineer who shut down a production demo, and that version of the story would never include the part about why. I thought about Garrett's face on my phone screen that first afternoon in the parking lot. Deep technical intuition. At 2:17, I executed the deactivation command. The dashboard flickered. One by one, the 47 green nodes shifted to amber, then to a steady red. License expired. Firmware entering safe shutdown mode. Thermal management offline. I watched the nodes go dark like a city losing power, block by block. Inside the demonstration center, things were happening that I could only piece together later from Dex's account and from the incident report that became part of the legal record. The battery test units went into standby simultaneously. The monitoring displays in the demonstration room flatlined. The temperature readouts, voltage curves, and performance metrics that Garrett had been walking the Meridian team through simply vanished from the screens. Garrett stopped mid-sentence. He looked at the screens, then at the Novatech engineers in the back of the room. One of them, a production manager named Kenji, was already on his phone. "We're seeing a system-wide firmware shutdown," Kenji told the room. "Give us a moment." The Meridian VP, a woman named Sharon Torres, leaned back in her chair and crossed her arms. "What kind of firmware shutdown?" Garrett tried to explain. He used the words routine maintenance protocol and scheduled update, which was the wrong thing to say to a room full of engineers who could see that nothing about the shutdown was routine or scheduled. Kenji tried to restart the firmware from the production server. Access denied. License expired. He tried the backup system. Same result. He tried to call ET. ET told him the firmware was locked at the licensing layer, and they had no administrative override because the license holder was not an employee. That was the moment, according to Dex, when the room understood. Sharon Torres asked one question: "Who owns the firmware?" Nobody answered immediately. Garrett looked at Kenji. Kenji looked at his phone. Linda, who was standing in the back of the room, looked at the floor. Finally, Kenji spoke. "The firmware was developed by a former employee under a personal license agreement. The license appears to have expired." Sharon Torres stood up. She didn't raise her voice. She said, "We'll need a full technical audit before we proceed with contract discussions," and she walked out of the demonstration room with her team behind her. The Meridian delegation left the campus at 3:15. They took their contract with them. I sat in my car across the street and watched the black SUV pull out of the visitor lot. My phone rang 4 times in 20 minutes. Novatech's main number twice. An unknown number I assumed was their attorney's, and then a number I recognized, Richard Whitfield's personal cell. I let them all go to voicemail. Then I texted Sonia. "It's done." She responded, "They'll call by morning. Don't answer until I'm with you." I drove home. My hands shook the entire way, which I accepted as the price of having just done the most terrifying thing I'd ever done. The firmware was offline. The Meridian contract was frozen. Novatech's demonstration center was running 47 inert battery packs that couldn't be restarted without my code. I parked at my apartment, walked inside, and sat on my kitchen floor for about 10 minutes because the chair felt too normal for what had just happened. Then I got up, made coffee, and waited. They called the next morning at 7:42. Not Novatech's attorneys. Richard Whitfield's personal attorney, a man named David Hargrove, who called Sonia's office and asked for a meeting at the earliest possible convenience to discuss a resolution that serves all parties. Sonia called me an hour later. "They're panicking. Meridian froze the contract. Novatech's stock dropped 11% yesterday on supply chain uncertainty. The board is asking questions Richard doesn't want to answer." We met them 3 days later in Sonia's conference room on Chapel Hill Boulevard. It was a small room, 4 chairs, a table, a window that looked out on a dental office parking lot. Not exactly the kind of space where you negotiate against a company valued at $2.7 billion. But Sonia said that was the point. Let them come to us. David Hargrove arrived with a junior associate and a folder thick enough to suggest they'd spent the past 72 hours preparing for every possible argument. Richard Whitfield came in person. He wore a navy suit and a tie I recognized from his company portrait. He looked older than the last time I'd seen him, which had been 8 months ago at the All Hands where he'd introduced Garrett. Garrett was not in the room. Richard sat down across from me and didn't say anything for a long moment. I could see him deciding which version of himself to lead with. The paternal founder, the aggressive CEO, the pragmatic negotiator. He chose pragmatic. "Arya, I want to resolve this in a way that respects your contributions to the company." "My contributions? Is that what we're calling them now?" Sonia touched my arm, lightly. I took a breath. David Hargrove opened his folder and began the legal conversation. It lasted 2 hours. I'll compress it. Novatech's position, the firmware was a work product, the license agreement was unenforceable, and the deactivation constituted tortious interference and potential CFAA violations. They wanted the firmware reactivated immediately, and a mutual release of all claims. Our position: the firmware was independently developed pre-employment intellectual property. The license was enforceable. The deactivation was a lawful exercise of license revocation, and the real issue on the table was the patent fraud, including the backdated assignment, the inventorship misrepresentation, and the continuation patent filed using stolen personal research. I laid out the timeline, the original filings with my timestamps, Garrett's patent with the backdated assignment, the slide deck metadata, the continuation patent with my personal thermal data. I didn't mention Dex by name, but I referenced the information he'd provided about how the personal research was obtained. Richard listened without interrupting. His face didn't change much, but his hands did. By the time I finished showing the backdated documents, his right hand was gripping the armrest of his chair hard enough that I could see the tendons. The negotiation took another hour after the evidence presentation. Sonia was precise. David Hargrove was careful. Richard was quiet for most of it, which told me the decision had already been made before he walked in, and this meeting was about the terms, not the outcome. The final agreement had 4 parts. 1. My name restored as co-inventor on the primary solid-state battery patent. Not sole inventor, because Novatech's legal team wouldn't concede that fully, arguing that company resources contributed to the development. Sonia pushed back. We settled on co-inventor with a priority filing acknowledgement that established my inventorship predated Garrett's involvement. 2. A licensing agreement for the thermal management firmware. Novatech would pay ongoing royalties for continued use of my code, at a rate that reflected its market value. The royalty stream would fund my work for years, but it was a fraction of what the patent was worth in total licensing revenue. A fraction I had to accept because fighting for full valuation would mean years of litigation I couldn't afford. 3. The continuation patent would be withdrawn and refiled with corrected inventorship reflecting my personal research contributions. 4. A mutual non-disparagement clause. Neither side would discuss the details publicly. No press releases, no industry statements, no conference panel references. The story, as far as the battery world would know, was that Arya Patel left Novatech and licensed her firmware independently. I reactivated the firmware from Sonia's conference room at 4:17 that afternoon. The dashboard showed 47 nodes returning to green, one by one. Richard stood up to leave. At the door, he turned back. "You could have come to me first, Arya, before all of this." I looked at him. This man who had hired me, shaken my hand after the first prototype, told me I was the best investment the company ever made, and then stood by while his nephew erased me. "I did come to you, Richard. I went to my manager. I went to HR. Nobody listened." He held my gaze for 2 seconds, then walked out. David Hargrove followed. The junior associate gathered the folders. Sonia and I sat in the empty conference room. The light through the window had shifted from afternoon to early evening. "You did well," she said. "I got a fraction. You got your name back, and the royalties will hold." She was right, but the fraction stayed with me. The distance between what I built and what I was paid for building it. That gap would never fully close, and I knew it. And knowing it was part of the cost of winning the way I'd won. 6 months later, I unlocked the door to a converted industrial unit on the east side of Durham and turned on the lights. The space was 1,200 square feet. Concrete floor, high ceilings, one row of windows near the top that let in a band of morning light. I'd rented it in September with the first royalty check and spent 2 weeks painting the walls, installing proper ventilation, and building a lab bench from scratch, using plans I'd sketched on the back of a lease agreement. The equipment wasn't cutting edge. A refurbished mass spectrometer, 2 thermal cycling chambers I'd bought secondhand from a university lab that was upgrading, and a fume hood that rattled when the ventilation kicked on. But it was clean, calibrated, mine. Jules arrived at 8:30, the way she did every morning. 23 years old, fresh out of NC State's materials science program, the same department where I'd done my thesis. She'd applied after seeing a job posting I'd put up at the University Career Center, and I'd hired her because she reminded me of someone, though I didn't tell her that. She reminded me of myself at 24, walking into a failing company with too much confidence and not enough equipment, believing the work would speak for itself. I was teaching her that it wouldn't. Not because the work didn't matter, but because the world around the work was full of people who would take the credit if you let them. I taught her to timestamp everything, to keep shadow copies, to read every contract before she signed it. "Morning," Jules said, dropping her bag on the bench. "The lithium sulfide samples from yesterday are ready for impedance testing." "Good. Run the first sweep at 0.5 C rate. I want to see how the interface holds at low current before we push it." She nodded and got to work. I liked that about her. She asked questions when she didn't understand something, and she didn't ask questions when she did. In 6 months, she'd learned the difference, which was something some engineers never figure out. The royalty income from Novatech was steady. Not lavish, but enough to cover rent on the lab, Jules's salary, equipment, and my own living expenses. It would hold for years if the solid-state battery market grew the way everyone expected it to, and every forecast I'd seen suggested it would. 2 EV companies besides Meridian had reached out to me directly about licensing my thermal management firmware. I was in early conversations with both, moving carefully, reading every contract twice, keeping Sonia involved. Novatech was still in business. Meridian Motors had signed a reduced contract after a 3-month delay and a full technical audit that required Novatech to migrate to a new firmware platform. The migration cost them $14 million and 6 months of production delays. Garrett Whitfield was still listed as Director of Battery Innovation on the company website, but a colleague told me he'd been quietly moved to a strategic advisory role with no direct reports. Richard Whitfield had not spoken to me since the conference room. Some people in the industry still thought I was the problem, the difficult woman who shut down a demo and cost a company its biggest client contract. I saw it in the way certain conversations went quiet at conferences, the way some introductions came with a pause. I didn't correct every version of the story. I corrected the ones that mattered, the ones that came from people whose opinions affected my ability to do business and build a lab and publish research. The rest I let go. Not because it didn't sting, but because fighting every wrong interpretation of who you are is a full-time job that pays nothing and leaves you too tired for the work that actually matters. I was unpacking a box of lab supplies one afternoon in November when I found it at the bottom, under a bag of nitrile gloves and a roll of pH indicator strips. My Novatech badge. Both halves, the lanyard cut cleanly by the security guard's scissors. I'd thrown them into the box during the 12-minute escort and forgotten they were there. I held the pieces together. The photo showed a 24-year-old version of me, hair too neat, smiling the way people smile when they don't know what's coming. Employee ID number visible. Novatech logo in the corner. I stood at my bench for a while, holding the two halves of the badge like pieces of a plate that had broken at exactly the wrong seam. Then I opened the top drawer of my desk, set the badge inside, and closed it. I didn't throw it away. I didn't frame it. I didn't need to make it mean anything. It was just a record of a place I'd been, and a version of myself that had believed the system would recognize the work. The system hadn't. And now I was standing in a lab I'd built with the money I'd earned from the work they'd tried to take, running experiments that would outlast any presentation Garrett Whitfield would ever give, and teaching a young engineer to protect her own floor before someone else tried to stand on it. Jules looked up from her impedance test. The interface is holding at 0.5 C. You want me to push to 1 C? I leaned over her shoulder and looked at the data. The numbers were clean. The chemistry was promising. The morning light from the high windows caught the edge of the sample holder, and for a moment, the whole bench looked like it was glowing. Push it, I said. Let's see what it can do. I spent the next 3 hours in my apartment going through every document I could access. The personal email archive was my anchor. 7 years of sent messages, received confirmations, and weekly lab summaries I'd mailed to myself every Friday before leaving the building. The habit had started as accident prevention, a backup in case the server crashed again, but it had become something else over time. A record, a shadow history that existed outside the company's control. I laid out the evidence in categories. Patent-related communications first, the original provisional patent submission I'd filed through Novatech's internal IP portal in April of the previous year. The confirmation email from the patent coordinator, Marissa Torres, acknowledging receipt. The follow-up email 3 months later asking about the status of the external filing. Marissa's response, "Still in review. I'll follow up with legal." She never followed up, or if she did, legal buried it. Next category, internal presentations. I had copies of 6 slide decks I'd authored between my 4th and 6th years at Novatech. Every one of them had my name in the metadata, my employee ID in the version history, and my formatting conventions throughout. The deck Garrett had used for the February board meeting was structurally identical to my October presentation, with 3 additions. A market analysis slide that looked like it came from a consulting template, a timeline that backdated the research by 4 months, and Garrett's name where mine used to be. I opened the original and the modified version side by side on my laptop screen. The cathode composition table was identical down to the decimal formatting. The electrolyte stability chart used the same axis labels I'd hand-coded because the default formatting in the software was ugly. Even the footnotes were mine. He hadn't changed the footnotes. The carelessness of it hit me harder than the theft itself. He hadn't even bothered to make it look different. He'd just assumed nobody would compare the 2 versions, because why would they? The original author was gone. I pulled up one more document. The internal performance review Linda had written about me 6 months before the firing. Arya continues to be the technical backbone of the battery innovation team. Her contributions to the solid-state program are foundational, and her expertise is irreplaceable. Irreplaceable. She'd used that word in November, and then replaced me in March. I organized the documents into subfolders: patent filings, presentations, internal communications, performance reviews. Employment contract with all appendices, including the firmware license in Appendix D. The separation agreement they'd pushed across the table, unsigned, with the backdated IP clause highlighted in yellow. The timeline was becoming clearer with every document. This wasn't an impulsive decision by a 26-year-old nephew trying to impress his uncle. This was a sequence, a deliberate sequence that started with Garrett's hiring, moved through systematic credit absorption, escalated to patent reassignment, and ended with my termination and an NDA designed to make the whole thing legally invisible. By midnight, I had 43 documents organized in chronological order. I printed the most critical ones and arranged them on the kitchen table next to the sticky note timeline. The table looked like a detective's caseboard from a crime show, except the crime was real and the detective was the victim. I sat back and looked at it. My coffee had gone cold for the 3rd time. The apartment was quiet enough that I could hear the building's water heater cycling in the basement. The evidence was strong, but evidence alone wouldn't be enough. Novatech had lawyers, money, and institutional momentum. They'd been preparing their narrative for months, maybe longer. The separation agreement, the NDA, the cease and desist that I knew was coming because you don't fire someone with this much leverage without locking them down legally. They had a plan. I needed one too. I picked up my phone and scrolled to a contact I hadn't used in 2 years. Frank's number. My old manager, the quiet electrochemist who'd signed off on my solid-state pivot and told me to keep shadow copies. He'd retired, but he knew people. Patent attorneys, specifically. He'd mentioned once, at his going-away dinner, that he'd worked with a litigator in Chapel Hill who specialized in inventor disputes. I texted him at 12:30 in the morning. "Frank, it's Arya. I need a name. The patent attorney you mentioned. It's urgent." He responded at 6:15. "Sonia Reeves, Chapel Hill Boulevard. Tell her I sent you. And Arya, whatever they did, document everything before you call." I was already ahead of him on that.